I could go crazy and no one would know it. Everyone's crazy. We know we all can go at a moment's notice. I could go crazy and no one would know it. Everyone's crazy. We know we all can go at a moment's notice. I could go crazy, drown in the ocean. Why wouldn't you want to? Here, dear, how many of you here like beer from where you come from? Near here now, do you dear hear me now? Hear this? We are the Chi-Chis, we reach these heights easily. Fight for the scraps of what seems still a thing. The big squeezes and teasers, trailblazers and laser beers all around widows. Take a deep for the headers. Idleness, fashion, so fulsome and buxom. Flotsam, jets, it all floats in the ocean. And me kicking back with that hit song. This kind that'll add a little light to your life. It's nice once you catch on. Twitter be this catch all, latch key kid, Adderall. Key dot, that's why they look so detached. It's all new metal and money, cocaine in the club and kids fucking in public. And what of it? You Republican? You can't catch me in this castle. I'm the king of my mockingbird sings what I tells it to sing. I could go crazy and no one will know it. Everyone's crazy.
This episode of The Hammer Factor is brought to you by Colorado Kayak Supply Online. They like to remind you that they are up and running. Bobby, JR, and Kim are on the phones and chat box day and night. 2020 gear from Piranha, Dagger, Liquid Logic, and Jackson, you name it, they have it. Bobby will hand ship your gear to almost anywhere in the world. If you need to save money, which we all do right now, use promo code GTFOutside. Get the outside. That's capital G, capital T, capital F, capital O for outside. For a 10% discount off your entire cart. If you're strapped for cash, they have this cool Affirm feature where you can pay in small chunks. Also, give Bobby a call directly, 970-344-8836, and he may give you an extra 5% off. Actually, I can't guarantee that. GTF Outside. Check it out in the show notes. All right, welcome to Hammer Factor episode 72, Paddling Through a Pandemic. I want to start off by saying we're living through truly unprecedented times. Everyone listening right now to this show has seen their schedule or their job or their life in general drastically change in just a few days. The situation in the country and around the world, for that matter, is evolving daily. The things we talk about on this show may not be relevant in 3 or 4 days. And while no one can predict the future, it's guaranteed the next few months will be something tomorrow's generation will study in their history books. To say we're going to face adversity is a colossal understatement. Having said that, there will be another side to all this. We'll move through this cloud, and that is where we want to, and what we want to discuss on this show, moving through the cloud. Primarily, can we, or even should we, keep kayaking through this era of social distancing? And if we should, what is the best practice? This show's not really going to be like previous shows, and you can probably tell that already. There's a little bit more serious tone going on here, but there's some important messages we wanted to get out. We'll skip the usual listener mail and banter about the industry trends and paddle offset. We may throw a rant and rave at the end of the show with our guest, but other than that, this is going to be a one-on-one discussion with our special guest today, Dr. Jack Diddy. Now, before I introduce Dr. Diddy, I want to make it clear that the Hammer Factor is not your resource for everything on this new virus. The World Health Organization, the WHO, and the CDC are where the buck stops in regards to the facts about everything on this show. All right, now having said that, I'm sitting out on his deck right now, it looks like, through the Skype portal. I'd like to introduce Dr. Jack Diddy. Dr. Diddy is a Class 5 kayaker and a Class 5 Sea-Wanner who has been around the scene for decades. More importantly, Jack is a husband, father, and an ER doctor who will inevitably be on the front lines of treating those with this new virus. Welcome to the show, Jack. Is there anything I missed there or you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you, John. I would like to add a couple of things. One is just my purpose for being here. I think it's important. There's so much information coming at everybody so quickly right now. It's really hard to sort through it all and figure out what's important and what's not, and what's real and what's not. And I just hope to be able to help clarify some of those things for people as best I can. What I say is based on my interpretation of the best factual sources that I can find as of today, and hopefully it's good information for everybody out there. We are I think you can't stress enough that this is unprecedented. None of us have any previous experience in terms of dealing with something like this in our lifetimes, and this is going to be one of the biggest events in at least recent world history.
Yeah, I mean, of all the things out there, I feel like that's the only thing I really know. What? How are you? I mean, how is social distancing going? How is it in your world? I mean, in the ER and all that.
Yeah, so right now for me, it's good. My life is changing day to day. Just a week ago, I was still going to the pool and swimming and still going out and just doing relatively normal activities and taking my kid out to get ice cream. And now this week, of course, just as everybody else, we're staying at home and just trying to avoid contact with as many people as possible. I still go to work and, of course, have contact with people through that. But otherwise, even my personal interaction with my direct family members, I'm trying to be very cautious with, just because of my level of exposure that I expect to be ramping up in the coming days.
So what does that look like? What do you mean?
Well, so right now, at least in Western North Carolina, I guess the audience of this podcast may be at least national, if not global on some scale. In Western North Carolina, we're in a fairly isolated pocket of the world compared to a lot of other places, and we're not seeing a huge influx of cases yet, at least that we know of. And so right now, I feel like my exposure at work is low to moderate risk, and I don't want to bring that stuff home to my family. So right. I'm trying to when I get home from work, I'm trying to sleep in a place that's away from them, and I'm basically not bringing my shoes in the house anymore, and trying to not participate in making meals for my kid or my wife anymore, and letting them kind of eat independently of me. So just a lot of kind of common sense things to avoid the really obvious sources of contamination and contact.
Man, that is so heavy. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of our audience knows this, but before we get deeper into the discussion, let's start at the top. Let's start with the basics for people who don't know. What is the SARS-CoV-2 and what is COVID-19? What is it? Yeah,
so they're two related things. The SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the actual virus, and basically stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. The disease process that it causes in humans is called COVID-19. So it's and for most practical terms, for most people, the distinction is not super important. But for people that are studying the illness and communicating about the illness on a scientific level, it's an important distinction.
Okay, and then where did this come from? How did people? Why are people getting it?
So there's still some debate about that. As of last night, the stuff that I was reading suggests that the animal market in China theory may be a little off. It's still hard to tell, and I don't think there's a correct answer to give you here, but it seems to have come from an animal reservoir, so a virus that has been circulating in animals probably for quite some time, that then somehow jumped to humans. And it seems like that jump probably occurred in November. The initial estimates were in December, but it looks like they've been able to trace it back now to sometime in mid-November in China. And the exact animal source is still unknown. They suspect bats. They suspect pangolins as a possibility. which are really wild-looking animals if you've ever seen them.
Pangolin.
Pangolin, yeah,
Pangolin.
It's worth looking up. They, I guess they have unfortunately a really large market for them in Chinese medicine, and so there's a it's an animal that's probably going to go extinct at some point because of their demand for their scales, I believe it is.
So back up. So 4 months ago, this disease, in theory, did not exist in humans. And in
Correct.
those 4 months, it's spread all the way around the world.
Correct.
All right, so how do you get it? How do people get it?
So other than that initial kind of animal transfer, which is still a little unclear exactly how that happened, humans at this point are passing it amongst themselves. And so it's spread primarily through respiratory droplets. It sounds like there's a couple other ways that it can be spread as well. Like I think there's some evidence for fecal transmission, and which I guess I have to be careful with my terms here in terms of using layperson terminology, but basically it may be able to be spread through poop as well. And then it seems like there's probably some evidence for aerosol transmission or spread through the air. That's still some debate about the importance of that. But the primary method that people are spreading it right now is through respiratory droplets. So if I have the illness, I cough, I have some droplet that comes out of my mouth that lands on a surface, and then you touch that surface, and then you touch your mouth. That's basically how the illness seems to spread at this point.
And what other illnesses are like this? Is there any other things that we can relate this to that we know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the vast majority of typical upper respiratory viruses are spread in this way.
Okay. So that's like the common cold, the common flu, all that stuff.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what happens if you get it?
So the illness that you get, the one we referenced earlier with the COVID-19, is a febrile illness. I want to be cautious saying it's similar to the flu because there's so many things about this virus that are distinct from the flu and make it way more dangerous in terms of the human population than the flu. But the illness that you actually get is actually pretty similar to the flu. So you get basically a fever and a cough. Those are the two primary symptoms, I would say, in most people. I think relatively it depends on your age and your risk factors. In most people, it's a relatively mild illness to begin with, and then has the potential to progress as the days go on.
So clinically, is a mild illness that you're just like got 103 fever and you're laying in bed aching all day, in your field, is that mild? Yeah.
So our definition of sickness, I guess, in the ER is a little different than the layperson view of sickness. So, you can feel really, really miserable, but in the perspective of an ER doctor, you may not actually be sick. So when we say sick, we're talking about like when I see somebody in my job that I say, oh, that person's really sick. What I'm talking about is their blood pressure is very low, their oxygen saturation level is very low, and basically their their whole body's response to the illness is failing essentially. So that's when an ER doctor uses the word sick, that's what they're talking about. It's different than when I'm at home with my kid and I say, oh, my kid's sick. That's maybe they got a fever, or maybe they got a cough. They're going to get better from it. So it's just a different perspective, and I guess we have to be a little careful with the terminology we use outside of work. But.
Right. So you got to wear two hats. When you're at work, you got one hat on. When you're at home, it's a different definition.
Yeah.
When we see these reports about, you say the vast majority of people, they just have mild symptoms, does that mean they're getting a big fever and laid up in bed and feel like crap for a while, or what do you?
Yeah, I think I got to preface my comment with I have not seen personally and taken care of personally cases of this where we don't have testing available at our facility yet on a broad level. So I can't give you a direct experience perspective of that, but from what it seems, about 80% of people are going to have an illness that does not require hospitalization. So,
right. Okay.
You may feel sick, you may have a high fever and a cough, but your oxygen level is not dropping, your blood pressure is not dropping, your immune system is doing its job and fighting off the illness.
Okay. And so, coming back to what you just said, so you guys don't test for this, or you've done?
Well, so we've had some limited testing available so far. The testing is in short supply, or the test kits are in short supply.
Even still,
yes. The availability of them seems to change on a day-to-day basis. Some days at work, I've been told that we have plenty available, and then on other days, I've been told, oh, we only have a few available, and we need to ration them and use them wisely. So it's I think there's been a huge push this week to get testing more widely spread, but that process has been unfortunately much slower than we would have liked.
Huh. And is it important at this point, to the testing? I mean, it seems like
it's it's approaching at some point a place where testing is going to become irrelevant, and you just assume that everybody has it. We're getting there. I think right now I would still like to be able to test people and to know the amount of it in our community. I think this is still, it seems like clustered in areas that where there's been more mixing of people. So places that have major international airports, places, big cities basically, where you have just large populations of people coming together from many different places. Of course, you're going to have more, earlier onset of infections and clusters of infections in that area or in those areas. And until we get good testing available in these more rural areas, like in the place where I work, we really don't know the exact degree of the problem yet here.
Well, I mean, even for your own well-being, to just know if you were in contact with someone who had this, it seems like that would be some peace of mind.
Yeah. Well, I think, what we're doing at this point, we're operating on the idea that anybody with the symptoms that would suggest this illness and no other distinct cause of that fever or cough. Like, so if we see somebody that has a fever and a cough and they have a positive flu test, then we know we're dealing with the flu. But if we see a person with a fever and a cough and a negative flu test, those are the people that we are assuming they have this illness until proven otherwise.
Right. And so that's one thing you're doing at work. Is there anything different, like protocols or? Probably the biggest thing at work right now for where I work is just kind of ramping up our preparations and response to the expected volume and change in kind of disease presentations that we're going to be seeing over the next few weeks. Like we're still kind of operating on normal illness that we see. I mean, we're still seeing normal illnesses come in that are just kind of your classic everyday ER problems, and we're preparing for a pretty big onslaught, which we expect anytime in the next any day it could start and could ramp up very quickly. And I expect by mid-April, it's going to be just balls to the wall, basically. At your hospital.
That's what I expect. It's a little bit of a guess, but yeah.
What's the vibe like with the nurses and your other doctors, and like what are you guys talking about?
I think every day everybody's still processing what all this means and how we need to behave differently. I guess in an ideal world, I would say that we always take all of these infection control precautions and things like that, but we're doing it to a much greater level than I've ever seen. People are wearing protective equipment anytime you go into a room with a patient that has any symptoms that could suggest this thing. And we've ratcheted down control of the facility a little bit better, where we're restricting visitor hours and doing screening of all staff and all visitors before entering the hospital to try to protect the hospital, basically, because we have to keep the staff healthy. We have to keep everybody kind of ready to work at all times. So it's going to be one of the challenges with this illness, is making sure that we have the personnel available to treat all the patients that we expect to be coming in.
Right. Well, now for the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. I know that I've been kayaking a few times since this has been going on, and you've been kayaking a few times, I believe. I mean, is kayaking safe? How do we go about it?
Yeah. So, it's funny. Part of me, it feels silly even discussing the issue when there's so many crazy things going on in the world. But, this is something that we all love. This is a passion that all of us have, I think, if you're listening to the Hammer Factor, there's a good chance you've devoted a solid portion of your life to this addiction that we all have. And so we have to figure out how to maintain, the things that keep us sane and happy while we're dealing with adverse situations. So I think it's important to maintain as much of those kind of normal things as we can, but we have to do it safely. And we have to do it in a way that's not stressing the system any more than it needs to be stressed, or creating a problem that wasn't there. So, I've been kayaking some. I think a lot of the kayaking I've done in the last few years has been self-support shuttles. So I'll go find a river somewhere and drop my boat off at the top, drive down to the bottom, and then just run the shuttle on the trail, or sometimes ride a bike or something like that, and then paddle down. So I've done a lot of solo trips like that. I'm not going to tell people that solo kayaking is the way to go. It's always a bad recommendation. And what I would suggest is everybody make their own, obviously, individual choices. But I think we just need to follow the guidelines that were being given in terms of social distancing. So social distancing is basically a measure to try to limit the spread of this illness. The whole reason we're trying to limit the spread of this illness is to avoid overwhelming the hospital system in the first few weeks or months of this. And so if we can limit the spread of this, or at least kind of delay the onset of this huge, or these very large numbers of people that we expect to be getting sick, if we can prolong that and mobilize resources in the meantime, or even better, get a vaccine at some point, we can help to change the course of this a little bit. And so we want to just follow the social distancing guidelines that they're recommending right now. And it seems like, I think basically they're saying they're recommending people stay 6 feet apart. So, that obviously presents some difficulty if you're planning on going out and running shuttle with a group of people. That's something I think that we all have to very carefully think about. Do we want to be participating in that or not? And my personal choice is going to be to not do that. I'm not going to tell anybody how to behave. I can only just kind of give you the facts as I see them, and and kind of my interpretation of what I want to do with my life. And I can tell you that that's something that I personally will not be doing in the foreseeable future.
So cramming 7 people in the Tacoma is probably not best practice at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about seatbelts later on, and that kind of thing. But, I think right now I think the hard thing for people to understand is, and especially in a group, so kayakers in general, I would imagine, are if you look at the demographics, it's probably a relatively young, healthy group of people. And it's so easy for a young, healthy person right now just to say, hey, for young, healthy people, this illness is not going to affect me, and it probably won't. However, I guarantee you a lot of these young, healthy people that are thinking that have parents or have brothers or sisters or grandparents that are in a significant risk category for a bad outcome for this illness. And, I think we all need to think about those people in our lives that we don't want to pass this on to.
Right. shifting off of kayaking for a second, like I do a lot of mountain biking, trail running. What's protocol there? I mean, that seems like a pretty safe route, is to go out riding your bike.
Yeah, I think I would say there's in terms of using the word protocol, because there is no historical precedent for this
Right.
type of thing.
Right.
There is no protocol. But it seems like that kind of activity is totally safe, and obviously maintain the social distancing. But yeah, by all means, get out there and exercise. I think we all need to try to stay as healthy as we can, and the other thing is just using this as an opportunity. I mean, a lot of people are out of work right now, or at least on limited schedules, or maybe staying home with their kids. Take your kids out and teach them how to run or hike, or if you don't have kids, just go out and learn how to become a runner, become a learn how to mountain bike, learn yoga. Use this opportunity to improve your health as best you can.
Yeah, and something we were talking about earlier, I don't think this made it on the show, but this is an opportunity for a lot of people. I mean, we got lemons. You got to find some lemonade through the lemons, and if you can take this time and get in the best shape of your life, go paddle flat water, go get really good at attainments, like you say, do the human powered shuttles. Make some goals. Like you say, make some goals, track your progress, get a whitewater journal, write it all down. I don't know. That's what I've got to do, just simply to maintain my sanity. It's not really being selfish or whatever, but there's no telling when the other side of this is going to come, so you gotta, in my opinion, you gotta figure out some way to stay within guidelines, but you can't quit living.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, and I think it is a fine line. I think you want to be, and particularly if you live in an area where that's getting hit really hard with the illness and really stressing the EMS system or the hospital system, you really don't want to be adding to that with taking risks. So I think everybody needs to consider taking a step back in terms of their normal risk-taking behavior, and and just also think about kind of the optics of what you're doing as a group. There's going to be a lot of people really struggling in the next, who knows how long, with all kinds of issues. And while we certainly want to maintain healthy lifestyles and active lifestyles and find joy where we can, I think we just also have to be conscientious about that.
You're just talking about basically bragging about whatever you're doing on Facebook and that kind of thing.
Well, just, I think, in Florida this week, you saw the kids on the media, there were kids out there partying on the beach on spring break. And,
it was elbow to elbow. I saw that.
Yeah. And they're catching a lot of flack for that. And, and I get it. A lot of kids, when I was 20 years old, I didn't think about my place in world events and how I could help that. I'm sure I was just, a selfish kid, just trying to have fun. And that's just the human nature. But, I think we just have to be careful as a group about, I think we need to just make sure we're listening, paying attention, and following the guidelines as best we can, while we pursue our recreational interests.
Yeah, good point. Obviously this is your opinion because no one can know this, but how do you see all this ending? How do you see it happening?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of unknowns there. The biggest thing about this, until we get a vaccine, there's going to be very large numbers of people, it looks like. The models that they're putting out there right now are pretty grim, actually, about how many people are going to be affected by this within the next year, or year and a half even. And all of these restrictions that they're putting in place are going to be with us for quite some time. I think it would be foolish to think that 2 weeks from now everything's going to be back to normal. And I think we need to realize that we're in this for the long haul, potentially at least months, if not much longer than months at this point. Oh. That may be a wake-up call for some people to hear that. But I think our lifestyles are going to be vastly different, as best I can tell, potentially through next year. So it's probably another reason why we need to maintain our sanity with keeping active and doing what we can to stay sane. But I think the other side of this is once the peak has occurred and a lot of people's immune systems have seen the illness, like after it's kind of gone through 60 to 70% of the world population, that's when I think the social restrictions will start to be backed off. It's really hard to predict. I don't know I'm not sure exactly how that's going to happen. But once the majority of the world has seen this illness, and it looks like it's spreading very quickly, then we'll be on the backside of it, and people's immune systems will be able to fight it off at that point, at least to some degree, and the things will slowly start to get back to normal after some time.
Man, so on the kayaking front, it's time to do some attainments. It's time to do some human-powered self-shuttles. Doesn't mean you have to go kayaking by yourself. It just means that you're trying to limit getting a big number of people. Of course, if there's family and things like that, you can cram in a car. Paddling with the family, that's a really good idea right now, in my opinion, if you can figure that out. Man, we got, this is certainly not your typical show, but I know that you made a post the other day on Facebook, and there was just a level of seriousness there, and I felt like it would be good to spread that amongst the paddling community. So, I mean, is there anything in that regard as far as rumors or things that you're seeing people talk about, or just specific things that you'd like to clarify?
I guess the one thing I would like to, I may have mentioned this earlier, but this is so much different than the flu. It's easy for people out there to say, oh yeah, look at the death rate. The death rate's the same as the flu. Why is everybody freaking out? There are so many kind of features of a virus that kind of determine its importance and its danger other than just the death rate. The death rate is fairly similar, seems like a little more than the flu. But there are multiple other factors of this virus. When an epidemiologist or an infectious disease doctor looks at this virus, their alarm bells are going off, and there's so much more to think about than just the death rate. So the kind of the degree that it reproduces in people, the lack of natural immunity that anybody has to this thing, is just way different. So if you hear people say, "Oh, this is just like the flu," that's a foolish way to think, and we all need to kind of get over that part of it.
Right. No, for sure.
I guess that's probably all I have to add to that, really.
Well, I don't know. This was insightful for me. I learned a lot of things. We've had a couple emails come across asking about kayaking in this era of social distancing, and so I figured it would be important to answer that one question. I do want to be clear that this is, when this show goes up in 3 days, all the information on here, not all of it, but a lot of it could be different. I just want to reiterate, go to your World Health Organization. These are unprecedented times. This should not be your guiding light, and it's your personal choice about how you navigate through all this. Well, to shut us down, I'm kind of springing this on you here, Jack Diddy. Every time, or Dr. Diddy, I should say. Jack's my neighbor. We're buddies, so I gotta address him a little bit more professional here on the Hammer Factor. But Before we get into everybody's favorite section of the show, I want to let our listeners know this Rants and Raves is brought to you by the 63rd Annual Rio Grande Mother's Day Race in Pilar, New Mexico on May 9th, 2020. There's a downriver race for kayaks, canoes, and SUPs in the morning, followed by a slalom race, freestyle comp, family float, and raft race on the 6-mile Class 3 Rio Grande racecourse just downriver of the famous Taos Box. 63rd Annual? Prizes for winners and raffle are brought to you by Adobe Whitewater Club of New Mexico, Immersion Research, Aquabound, Watershed, MST Adventures, New Mexico River Adventures, and many more. Registration and information at mothersdaywhitewater.com. And don't forget about the free camping and the Dutch Oven Cookout Friday night. On a side note, if due to current conditions they can't hold this event on the May 9th, they're going to move it to Father's Day. So go to mothersdaywhitewater.com, get on board, go celebrate the Rio Grande. I can go first if you would like and give you a second to think about it. I'm going to rave, and I'm going to rave about our local community right here. I'm seeing neighbors running to the store for each other, taking care of those that may be, like you say, a little bit more vulnerable. People are in an awkward way doing their best not to like hug and high five people that they see all the time. You know, there's a bus that started coming, bringing school lunches to the neighborhood. I just got to give a quick rave to our local community right here. Is there anything that you would like to rant or rave about, Doctor?
Yeah, I'll go for a rave. Just the way that the community is coming together, I agree with. The way that that my coworkers that I've seen coming together, and as everybody comes to terms with what this illness means, everybody's kind of stepping up to the plate and doing their part. And it's a sense that I get kind of around not just our local community, but just from what I'm reading online and from people that I used to work with, that I've been in contact with. It seems like a lot of people are really mobilizing to prepare themselves to fight this or to already be fighting it. And it's just a great thing to see everybody coming together and taking steps that they need to personal sacrifices. And it's going to be interesting. To me, this is obviously there's a lot of grim things about this, but it's a really fascinating time to be alive, and I try to appreciate that every day, even in the kind of nightmare that may happen in the next few months with this. This is an amazing world we live in, and I'm just thankful to be a part of it.
Yeah. And it's just important to remember this too shall pass. There will be another side to this. So keeping sane along the way is what I want. The primary statement, the primary takeaway of this show is that stay healthy, go outside. If you have a moment, if you can't work, if this is a chance to spend more time with your family, do what you can in that regard. Be as thankful as you can and move forward. Is there anything else you'd like to add there, Doctor?
Yeah, the last thing I'd say is if some of these people out there that think this is a hoax, if they're right, man, more power to them. I'll be glad to laugh at myself next month if all this just blows over. So,
me too. Me too, indeed.
I hope all you people have called it.
Well, let's get together and go run some shuttles on the green, dude. I got a new trail I can show you.
Yep. I'll just stay a little bit away from you.
All right. Thanks for coming on the Hammer Factor, Jack.
All right. Thank you, John.